I've been having difficulty getting my thoughts together on Giro Amagakure Seinen's slice of life serial Sweetness and Lightning, if only because there's so much to talk about, from its treatment of time and ritual to its representation of isolation and connection. But I think its most fascinating components arise from its most straightforward messages. The show is on the surface about cooking, fatherhood, and family. The episodes and the chapters follow the same general pattern. Kohei, a father and teacher who recently lost his wife with the help of high schooler Kotori, ends up cooking homemade meals for his daughter Tsumugi. Over the course of the series, the show never develops an overarching plot other than Tsumugi coming to a slow realization that her mother is gone, and that Kohei is the only parent she has left. Overall, this is a show about being, belonging, and behaving, but I want to focus on one very important aspect. So let's go back a few years. In the 1980s, there was a manga by Tochi Ueyama titled Cooking Papa, which was then adapted to an anime series from 1992 to 1995. Cooking Papa focused on a Japanese salaryman who hid a lot of his fascination with cooking from his co-workers, whom always assumed his bento was the product of his wife. In Cooking Papa, the role of the masculine identity is firmly focused on the salaryman, the staunch man, the steely man. His wife is the one expected to cook, not him. Here they exist in firmly defined frames of masculinity and femininity. The father is a strong, muscular salaryman who cooks mainly in secret. The levity and comedy of Cooking Papa comes partly from him hiding his identity. When we get to as recent as the mid-2000s, Aishiteru's Baby shows us how the image of fatherhood will still borrow the language of conservative parental frames. Since her mother left her, young Yuzuyu is placed under the care of the playboy Kippei, who, in the process, develops a strong bond with her. However, what's important is the language that Kippei and Yuzuyu co-opt to establish their relationship. Kippei states he's Yuzuyu's mother until her real mother comes back. Yuzuyu believes the same. What these examples note are embedded roles in gendered perceptions of fatherhood and motherhood. Both of them keep the language and character of both parental figures in very specific spaces. We can find this visible in a show like Clan and After Story. Tomoya and his father are examples of wrangling with single fatherhood. We can also see it in a story that has an ersatz father like Papa no Ikuto wo Kikinasai, where Yuta stands as a frantic salaryman father. And this is important for Sweetness and Lightning, because what is Kohei? We understand him as a widower, and therefore he stands in as someone needing to fulfill the roles of his late wife. But in essence, what does that make him? What differs him from a father figure thrust into a situation like Yuta, or a widower father like Tomoya? Well, it's the cooking. Though there are references to cooking in other father works, Kohei stands in a transitional period in debates on the Japanese father, and more importantly, on debates on masculinity. There's a term that's being bandied about in Japanese media that's getting a lot of attention, and that's the ikumen. Considered men whom are actively engaged in child rearing, ikumen isn't that much more significant than a buzzword, but it does stand as a marker in an older term, the kazuku sabisu, which notes fathers whom are more involved than they quote-unquote need to be. The term kazuku sabisu frames the role of fatherhood in specific contexts, notably that emotional connections are instrumental. In this context, they are waypoints in charting an evolutionary mapping of the Japanese father. Though I wouldn't consider Kohei an ikumen, since the central element is someone who undertakes the responsibility, not someone who's forced to. Kohei does display practices that embody contemporary counter-hegemonic masculinities. See, Japan has been having this shift from the absent caregiver father that dominated up to the early 90s to a broader, more inclusive and active father. And from 2008, there's another term that's growing to emphasize men who cook, the bento danshi, the box lunch boy. Now, while the bento danshi notes Japanese office workers who make and bring their box lunches to work, the term underlines the role in male cooking as another sign of counter-hegemonic masculinity. The male cook, regardless of circumstance, challenges a conservative perspective of hyperproductive manliness. With those two counter-hegemonic perspectives in mind, Sweetness and Lightning reveals itself to be a mapping of changing sensibilities. Kohei is a hybrid. He's a father thrust into a situation that learns to cook to be there for his daughter. After 6 months of providing for her, which is the pedestalized conservative fatherly image, he shifts to being involved with her. Tai's death, the mother's, emphasizes the necessity for shifts in masculinities and fatherhood. Much of Japanese rhetoric has been a shift towards what they call Nordic fatherhood, and Sweetness and Lightning embodies that. When a boy named Suguru comes to play, he comments on Kohei's ability by offhandedly asking, "Wow, you're a man, but you're good at cooking." And look at how Kohei is framed alongside a lot of the other fathers. Kohei's brother exemplifies a rough, boisterous man's man in Oyaji, but the lonely panel of him cleaning the fish situated by the two panels of Kohei and Tsumugi magnify that loneliness. Ida's father and mother is essentially a conservative nuclear family that fractures. Arguably, the healthiest family we're exposed to in all of Sweetness and Lightning is the family that doesn't emphasize conservative structures, but adaptive ones. When we move away from fathers, the fact that Yagi is himself a chef hones in on what was traditional male positions in cooking. A Japanese male cook was usually stereotyped as a connoisseur or a professional, but Kohei is neither. He's a man who picks up cooking for his daughter, a shared hobby. Kotori's mother is herself an inversion of gendered expectations. Megumi is a provider, but her work is quite similar to that of an absent father figure. What Kotori stresses, however, are the gaps the moment she isn't there, and how the show resolves itself when Megumi does show up. Here, expectations of roles tied to gender are lifted from conservative structures. In this difference, they support shifting identities of masculinity. Megumi undertaking provider positions emphasizes that traditional fatherly modes are outmoded and have no firm basis in contemporary Japanese society. Sweetness and Lightning is a confluence of two shifts in masculinity studies, those of the male cook and those of the father. Kohei represents a shift in both, that of an involved father, but also that of a cooking man. He is where Japan should be heading based on the literature on Japan's shifting masculinities. The death of his wife argues the necessity of these shifts. Yuan makes a phenomenal argument that the economic downturn of the 90s created major ruptures in the role of the Japanese male as solely economic providers, leading to a slow reframing of their masculinity. The response of many people in Sweetness and Lightning has been supportive. When they have a sandwich party, a brief panel shows Kohei wowing the guests with his food, while a father briefly thinks, a rival. But what about Kohei's new role? Does taking over the mother's role make him a new mother? Is it something like Kippei and Aishiteru's Baby, where strict lineations of gender persist through its language? One of the first tribulations that emerge in Aishiteru's Baby is the lunchbox scene, where Kippei makes her an oversized onigiri much to the teasing of her classmates. Based on Aishiteru's Baby's language, this scene emphasizes the absence of Yuzuyu's mother. The child's bento is a useful marker of gendered practices upheld by specific ideological structures. Anne Allison makes a great observation that as early as the 90s, the bento in the nursery school behaves as a domain. She states the mother in the process of the bento is alienated in the sense that others will dictate, inspect, and manage her work. And yet, it is precisely through this work that the woman expresses, identifies, and constitutes herself. Kippei's bento is the temporary constitution of himself as a mother to Yuzuyu. In that light, distinctions of ideological genderhood remain. But what happens when Kohei's bento is brought up in Sweetness and Lightning? What scene is analogous to that? Well, the scene never happens in the anime, and it doesn't happen until the 34th chapter of the manga. One last time in kindergarten, Kohei makes Tsumugi a bento with all of her favorite foods, and in it, a letter, words from mommy and daddy. And Tsumugi writes back to mommy and daddy. The family is both incomplete and whole in the cooking. Like Aishiteru's Baby, Sweetness and Lightning utilizes language to question senses of being, but at the same time it brings these people out of defined conservative labels. Kohei is doing Tai's work, but Tai's work was never just the mother's work. Not really. It's one caregiver's work. Mother's or father's work no longer matters. Rather, it simply bears the memories of the mother Tsumugi lost. Sweetness and Lightning is a love letter to both a shifting and yet vulnerable Japan. Kohei is the Japanese father, but the Japanese father is a battlefield of ideological spaces that's in transition. And every episode, every chapter, they're all cooking, absolutely. But the cooking is performative. It continually shapes a new family, a new identity, a new belonging. Just as how Kohei and Tsumugi are lifted from busy spaces to speak to Tai, or just as the girls chant and dance for wishes under a summer sky, the cooking is heightened to ritual. It builds a new ideological structure, a new state of being, one that stresses that with time comes change.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out the video. I really appreciate that. This video actually took me quite a bit of time to sort of suss out and figure out and edit and exactly try and get to an idea of exactly what it is I wanted to do. If you are a Patreon backer, thank you very much for backing. This is actually the first situation where Patreon was actually really useful because there was actually a lot of material that I ended up not being able to use or not really ended up using because the subject matter changed so often. So thank you very much for that, and if you ever want to help out the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. You can check it out on Patreon, link is in the video description. If you're interested in taking a look at other content creators, my recommendation for today would be Realjpoe, who actually has some pretty interesting videos, and they're a bit of a longer form than my videos, but I think you'll find them really interesting, whether you agree with him or not, as always. But definitely check it out. He recently made a video about YouTube's role or its challenges that it could pose for smaller anime productions. As always, if you guys like the video, give us a like. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe, and that is pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoy your day. Bye.